The latest on the Jacksonville Jaguars coaching search and then the playoffs and how it applies to the Jaguars. We'll talk about that here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. I am Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, where you can find everywhere you see or listen to or hear podcasts. Make sure you check into that location so you do not miss an episode. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you in part by Prize Picks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code all lowercase Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play just $5. Shout out to the everydayers for joining us. And if it's your first time, I hope you enjoyed the show. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to end up talking about, we're going to take a look back, a retrospective look at 2022 and 2023 when the Jaguars were actually winning a whole bunch of games, right? They were like 13-3 in like 16 weeks, going from the end of one season to the beginning of another. In 2022 and 2023, talk about them being in the playoffs, winning a game, coming from behind, and then also the game that they lost in Kansas City, how it felt to be in the playoffs and how can they get back to that, and how did they get to the point where they weren't there the last couple of years. We'll discuss that. We'll also talk about something that I've noticed in the playoffs that I've always talked about that I hope the fans have realized how important it is, and that's trench play, especially the offensive lines. When you see those teams and how they're pushing people around, it kind of makes you realize just how far the Jaguars have to go. So we'll touch that in the middle. And then the latest on the coaching search, that's where we're going to start right now. All right, the first round of interviews are done. You all know all of the names that the Jaguars have interviewed, offensive and defensive sides of the ball. Some of them participated this weekend. There are a lot of people that want the Jaguars to all of a sudden now interview Cliff Kingsbury. I promise you, if we said that 2 months ago, everybody would have been like, you out of your mind. That means that we all, and I said we, so I'm not being self-righteous here, we all sometimes suffer from right nowism. And that is that we forgot we just watched Cliff Kingsbury fail. And I'll tell you, Dan Quinn that's winning with Washington, if people had said Dan Quinn last year, they would have went crazy around here. It just shows you that sometimes the things that you want and the things that you ask for isn't the best thing for you. And some of the things that you don't want, you got to pause. I've always been the type of person to learn from my own mistakes. And the mistakes is stop being so focused on the one thing that you want the most. Sometimes you can get it without actually going and grabbing that thing. So the obvious thing about the Jaguars fans is they want an offensive coordinator, who they want an offensive play caller, someone that resonates with Trevor Lawrence. And I understand that. I totally do, because the quarterback position is so important. And the relationship between a quarterback and the head coach is very, very critical. And I'm not opposed to that, right? If they got Liam Cohen, if they somehow talk to Cliff Kingsbury next week or whenever, if he keeps winning, they ain't going to talk to him because he says he's not taking interviews. But if they talk to any of these offensive coaches and they hire them, if it's Ben Johnson, I'm good with it. People keep asking me what my preference is. And I say, I don't have one. And this is where the consistent part of me comes in. And it's not me hedging my bets. Like, it's not me being afraid to say, I want this guy, and then they go in another direction and I got to come over here and do shows talking about the difference between the two. I'm not going to do that. I think there are a number of guys that can do this job. I want them to make the best selection, and then I want to hear that person's plan. We're not privy to interviews. So asking me who I want, I just know the characteristics of the type of person that I want to be the leader of the team. And I just think a lot of times people are saying, no, but the disadvantage to this is that he's not this, or we're going to lose coaches. And I just think that's putting the cart before the horse. I think you have to learn how to win before you start worrying about losing people because you're winning. That's like drafting players and then worrying about how you're going to sign them all in free agency when they become free in 3 years or 3 or 4 years. That just doesn't make sense. You have to first learn how to win first. So there are a number of these coaches, 7 or 8 of them. I mean, they're all basically interviewing with every team around the league anyway, with the exception of Liam Cohen. I think he's the only one the Jaguars interviewed that's exclusive to Jacksonville, right? But some of these coaches didn't have what you would consider good weekends. Detroit lost, so both of their coaches didn't have great weekends. I don't think it was as bad. I think it kind of went hand in hand. Turning the ball over, will affect how many points a team puts on the board or how many opportunities you have to put more points on the board. Detroit scored 31 points. Their defense gave up 34, not 41. That was a pick six, if you recall. So one of them was a pick six. So then all of a sudden people saying, oh, nope, I don't want that. The danger in all of this stuff is a single sample size, man. You don't do it with coaches and you don't do it with players either. You just can't have a single sample size. That's like saying, and I know I'm gonna rub some feathers here, rub some people the wrong way, but that's just like saying I don't want Aiden Hutchinson because of the way he played against Georgia, and he didn't have enough of an impact, and you can't do that. You can't say I don't want Bo Nix because of the way he played in the college semifinal. And look at Bo Nix now. I don't want Jaden Daniels because of the games that he played against big teams like Florida State and Alabama and Georgia. I don't want Jaden Daniels. And then you see how that works. So you can't do it with coaches just like you can't do it with players. I'm not going to eliminate any coach. It's funny how people were willing to eliminate Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, but they still want Liam Cohen. And Liam Cohen actually lost a week earlier than those two. It just blows my mind that people think that way. Nobody wanted Dan Quinn, and look at Dan Quinn now. Cliff Kingsbury was the fired guy who people kept wondering why folks were talking about him. And say, okay, being a good-looking, young, charismatic guy and having ties to these quarterbacks that came out of Texas, okay, what else has he done? He had a losing record in college. He has a losing record as a head coach in the NFL. What has he done, right? Maybe the thing that he does best is be an offensive coordinator. Maybe Cliff Kingsbury and some of these dudes are the Norv Turners and the Dick LeBeaus of the world, where they're just better off being on one side of the ball, running their team from one side of the ball. We don't know that. And that's the thing that makes me always try to stay in my lane when it comes to knowing what a guy will do as a head coach as opposed to what he did as a defensive coordinator. And there's a lot of them out there, man. Vance Joseph is getting some look. He was bad as a head coach, but he's a great defensive coordinator. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it. You can sit around and call plays and organize and structure one side of the ball and coordinate that side of the ball for 30 years. And you could look at Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator for the Chiefs. He even interviewed with the Jaguars. I think that was more of an idea search. But when you think about it, what does that tell you? What does that tell you when a guy like that can have 4 Super Bowl rings and be an integral part of 2 different franchises winning, 2 different sets of championships, and all of a sudden, you think back to when he was a head coach and it just wasn't very good. Some people are just meant to be coordinators, and it is not a demerit on their career. That is why I keep saying that leaders of men matter. You're asking people to be a head coach. So whoever they hire, I want it to be the person that does the best, that blows that room up. When he comes in there, you have a distinct plan, not just for one player, but for all of your players. We just saw yesterday Josh Allen, right? Josh Allen. They didn't put that game on his back. Josh Allen had 127 yards passing. They didn't put the game on his back. They put the game on the back of the offensive line in the trenches in Buffalo when they played against Baltimore. And that's exactly where I want to park this and talk about it. There's more than one way to win games. Josh Allen looked like a hero today, and all he did was be a game manager. Yeah, what does that tell you? It tells you that you need a leader of men. It tells you need somebody that comes up with a plan like that. It tells you need someone who has the audacity to tell his top 3 quarterback in Buffalo, nope, this is the way we're going to do it. You want to win or you want stats? So you want the MVP. That's what a leader does. And this is what I've been trying to hammer home to people. Leader doesn't just go out there and show how nice his setup is with plays and how cute he could be on play call. Leaders make hard decisions the way Tom McDermott has made them in Buffalo. And he's a defensive coach, but that's exactly what I'm talking about. So let's discuss that as we move forward. Watching the playoffs, did the trenches affect how you feel about how far the Jaguars have to go? And then at the end, we'll talk about a look back, talk about where they were and why they would look like they were so close. And it just was fool's gold. We'll discuss that and more here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored in part by LinkedIn Talent Solutions. Growing your small business in 2025 comes down to how well you can hire. And let's face it, better hires start with smarter insights. That's where LinkedIn comes in with the strongest hiring data available. LinkedIn helps you identify the right candidates, giving you the confidence to make the best decisions for your business. I've used LinkedIn Jobs myself, and I can tell you it's a game changer when it comes to hiring the right people. Small businesses are wearing a lot of hats. I mean, you're trying to build, you're trying to have permits pulled, you're trying to get in regulation as far as the standards of whatever business you have, and sometimes you forget that you have to hire people to work. I know that from experience how important it is to make the right hiring decisions. Having access to insights like what skills candidates have or how they're connected to your network, that helps you feel confident when you pull the trigger. Hire smarter this year and find your next great hire on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Today's show is also sponsored by our friends over at Prize Picks. That is correct, man. Prize Picks is the absolute truth. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where Prize Picks comes in. I told y'all Saquon was going to do it yesterday, didn't I? If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. All you got to pick is more or less on player stats, and you can win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. And whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks has got you covered. I've been playing for a while now, and I'm having an absolute blast. And Saquon did not let me down this week like he slid down last week. No, he ran that thing through the snow and made a snow angel. Here's a special offer on Locked On NFL listeners. For Locked On NFL listeners, download the app today and use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, we're moving along here on Locked On Jaguars. We're at your team every day. We're talking about this coaching search, and now we're going to kind of veer into, did you watch the games? Sometimes you don't realize just how far off your team is from contending the way at the high level. And all of those teams this weekend, whether they won or lost, at some point they played at a very, very high level. They knew their identity, and it was identity versus identity. And eventually one team's playing one and one didn't. But all of the games were really, really thrilling, in my opinion, in one way or another. Even the Houston game had its moments. The game that they lost to the Chiefs. But the one thing I did know was the importance of trench play. How teams were able to impose their will with their offensive line, and then how other teams were able to, and sometimes even against that team that was imposing their will, make plays when you had to with great players on defense. That's the thing that I think about more than anything. More than thinking about Trevor Lawrence, because I have actually seen Trevor play in a playoff game, play in a couple of playoff games. He had a half that was twice as bad as the one Lamar Jackson had yesterday against the Chargers. But he had a second half that was very, very good that ended up with them making a field goal. So people look at it like that's a triumphant moment. Whereas if you miss that field goal or a guy drops a pass that could have tied the game like it did yesterday, then it becomes all about the quarterback. But in reality, what it is, it comes down to your offensive line being able to do everything that it has to do, and your defensive line being able to make plays and to not let the other offensive line do everything that they want to do. And all of the games had these moments. And that's where I want to park. Are the Jaguars on that level? No, they're not. And this is the thing about them losing so many games by one one score that kind of drives me crazy when people say they just need to figure out one more score per game. This is not how this works. And y'all know that. It doesn't work that way. Okay. The fact that they lose all of those games that way tells you that it doesn't work that way. That people know that all you got to do is do this, and do this, and the Jaguars going to fall short. Just keep leaning on them. They're going to make a mistake. And I think that comfort level that other teams play with when they play Jacksonville comes from the fact that people just don't believe that they're physical. And you've heard analysts say this over and over again on TV, that the Jaguars appear to be soft. And it's almost like, how can a team that is built on physical traits be soft? And that's because they're all airport in some situations. You can look big, strong, and physical. If you don't have a mindset of being physical and nasty, that's the problem. And I think that's the problem when it comes to Jacksonville. They're a long ways away from being able to compete with the top teams. Maybe some of those teams that were in wild card weekend, the Jaguars aren't that far away from. But every team that I saw this weekend, with the exception of maybe Houston, the Jaguars are a little bit further away than you. I mean, Houston lost, right? And they got pushed around. So to get to the level of physicality as maybe the top 6 teams, they have a long, long way to go. And I think it doesn't just start with drafting people. I think it starts with injecting whatever DNA those. First, you have to identify who you want to be. Then once you do that, all of that has to be a team-wide thing. It even has to be a toughness thing that comes from the coaches. Because watching these games, that's what these teams are. I also see teams that don't appear to be just trying to figure out plays that work. They're very detailed in things that they want to pull off and the things that they want to do, from double shovel passes, handoff shovel passes to, you can just tell these teams just work from guys catching screen passes and wide receivers blocking to a T. I had somebody tell me last week they don't care about wide receivers blocking. Well, I guarantee you, if the coach that you hire doesn't care about wide receivers blocking, he won't be the coach long. These are all things that people have to think about. I don't expect fans to think about football the way I do as an analyst. I don't expect fans to think about football to the depth of, obviously, coaches who think about it even bigger and further along than I do, and people like me. But you have to understand and know that when you're trying to compare and contrast what a coach has in one spot and how he would be able to apply that to a new team, you have to say he doesn't have the things that he has up there to be able to do those things. So either he's going to have to do something different, or they're going to have to go and get these people. Who goes to get people? GMs. That's why everything has to be in lockstep, in my opinion. And I think a hindrance to that is Trent Baalke. It doesn't mean that Ben Johnson won't take this job if Baalke's proud. I told anybody who would listen to me, this is a good job. The Jaguars' job is a good job. It's just that if a guy has choices and he could go somewhere else with the GM of his choice, then it might make the Jaguars' job of obtaining that person even more difficult. That is the point that I'm saying. I believe without Trent Baalke, the Jacksonville Jaguars' job is the number one job in the NFL that is open, in my opinion. In my opinion, it is the best job open if you take away the fact that Trent Baalke is present. It's still a good job even with his presence. Okay? Because that, obviously you're going to have, whoever takes his job over is going to have some sort of understanding with him. The thing is will that understanding work long term? Will it start to slowly change? Will, that's the problem. Everybody's good when they first meet. It's like dating somebody. You don't have if you're arguing with somebody when you first meet them, you ain't supposed to be with them. But everybody's good and everybody plays nice when they first meet. And then when things start getting tough, that's when all of the differences come out. And that's when I think having somebody who is on step and in step with you really, really matters, because you know what you're going to do before you even get to those situations. And there's a lot of trust that has to go into it. So I don't believe the Jaguars are as close as some people would suggest. I think, as opposed to looking at what the scores of the losses are, I would rather look at the record, and I'll tell you that they're not that far away. They can change like Washington did. but they actually have to do it. Will they? Will the approach change? The one that has not worked at all here, that's where I disagree with Shad Khan. And I'm not talking about medical staff and support people. I'm talking about the product that is on the field. I don't think they have the trenches to compete, and I don't think they have a lot of the skilled players that they need to compete at a high level. I think the Jaguars will have to have, before they get to that point, I think the Jaguars need 28 to 30 new players. That's just me. That's just my opinion. All right, I'm going to tell you, I'll take a look back, because some people will say, well, Wig, they were just right there a year and a half ago, and you weren't saying that. You're right, I wasn't. But I'm saying it now because that's not where they are anymore. I'll take a look back and tell you why a little bit of that was fool's gold and what happened to make them turn it around so fast, and why did it fall even faster. We'll discuss that and more here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep action going. Keep all of that action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars. A look back at 2022 and 23. The Jaguars started out very slow in the 2022 season. They were 2-7. Folks weren't really too upset because they knew the Jaguars had a long way to go, and they were just looking for little pieces and little parts and little spots of improvement. Then it happened. Then the Jaguars ended up 9-7, right? The Jaguars won seven. They ended up 9-8. They won 7 out of their last 8 games, and then won a miraculous wild card game against the Chargers, where they had 4 interceptions in the first half. Trevor Lawrence did. They were down 27-0, stormed all the way back and won because the defense stopped outside of a field goal. The defense stopped the Chargers from doing anything. The Jaguars ended up winning that game. I think it was like 31-30 or something like that. And very, very, very big moment. And then the next week they went out and they played Kansas City, and they were right there, man. It was a 2-score game, and they scored a touchdown or were driving again to try to tie the game up, and they fumbled, and then the Chiefs got the ball back, and that was all she wrote. But was that real? Yeah, it was real. They actually did it. Were they good enough? In a way. The Jaguars kind of got hot, and it was early in that relationship. It was early in the Trent Baalke, early in the Doug Peterson dynamic with Trevor Lawrence. It was early in that relationship. Things just clicked. They were just playing along, and all of a sudden, this chemistry, everything came together. The defense, Mike Caldwell was the defensive coordinator. Everything clicked. And believe it or not, Press Taylor was the offensive coordinator who was calling those plays down the stretch. All right. And that didn't come from Doug. That came from players. That came from highlights and people saying that he was up there calling plays. All right. Early in that relationship, it's too early we're playing on enthusiasm. We're playing on togetherness. It is all us. We're trying to figure this out. There was no room for divisiveness. There was nothing divisive about that team. In fact, it was that chemistry, and it was that want to together, and the understanding. That's why they were able to do that stuff, because they had a plan. They knew who they were. They did have a little bit of an identity, and they were just playing for each other and playing together. Now, I'm not telling you at some point the team kind of fell apart and guys started disliking each other. I am not saying that. What I am saying is, at some point, chemistry isn't enough. At some point, playing together isn't enough. At some point, knowing each other and liking each other isn't enough. You actually, when people start adjusting to who you are, you actually have to say, okay, now it comes down to physicality. It comes down to us knocking people off the ball. And what happened is the Jaguars stood pat after that first year. They felt they had arrived. They felt that 9-8 after what this organization had been through, 9-8 did feel like 13 wins. A playoff win it felt like this was the birth of a whole new 2017. This is a birth of a whole new 1997 or 1999. This was like, man, we are going to do this thing. This thing is going to keep going. But smarter heads, people that have been around the NFL long enough, should have known better. They should have known. No, you add to it. You keep trimming fat. You don't rest on your laurels. You can't carry over from what happened last season to the next season. And it looked like they did. The Jaguars were not playing that well, but they were 8-3. And then the bottom fell out. And it was the 49er game where I really, really said this, man. And I remember the postcast. I remember it like yesterday. I came on and said that they got a problem. Now, Mark, they were only 8-4 at that point. I said, nope. They got a big problem. And anybody who's been on this show with me long enough, remember, as I said it, I said, they got a big problem. And at that point, I was right. I knew it was a bigger problem than it's almost like you go to the doctor and you don't think nothing wrong, man, but that scan just showed me something, man. We got to fix this. We got to change. And it's not about being omniscient or seeing something that everybody else didn't see. I just saw an 8-4 team that had a massive issue that they had to fix. They fired the defensive coaches. My problem with the team was the offensive line. I said it over and over and over and over again. They ain't got no hind parts. Then you get in the offseason and they say, we ain't physical enough. Like, oh, really? I thought I said that. And then they didn't add anything to the offensive line except like one guy. And they fired the defensive staff. They didn't really get more physical. And Trent says at the combine, you don't make guys more physical once they get into the NFL. And I always told everybody that because they only do maintenance in the NFL. Nobody does strength and conditioning to the point where a guy's going to turn into something else unless he does it himself in the offseason. They're born that way. You just got to draft bigger and physical people, which is why he drafts traits. But his traits are about length and athleticism, not about brute strength. Because sometimes I think if a guy's arms aren't long enough on the offensive line, he won't take them. If a guy's a little bit of a tweener, he won't take them. You're missing a lot of really good football players when you do that. You are. Like all of that money they spent in free agency last year. This is why I keep telling people about them throwing money at the defensive line. Eric Armstead, a second-round pick, a fourth-round pick. They keep spending all this money on free agency. They re-signed Josh Allen. Everybody wants them to throw more money at that position, right? You know, Mekhi Becton got picked up by the Eagles last year for next to nothing, and I know everybody considered him a little bit of a bust. He's 6'7", 350 pounds. He's a left tackle. He's a right tackle. The Eagles and Coach Stoutland took him and turned him into a right guard, and that dude is phenomenal for the Philadelphia Eagles this year. See, this is the kind of stuff that you need to know and do, and these are the type of people that you need to be throwing peanuts at to get them here and taking I ain't even calling it kicking the tires because I think that's disrespectful. I think it is saying, okay, you know what? What if we got our hands on him and what can he do for us? Your offensive line ain't good. The Philly offensive line is too good. They're so good, they still did that. The Jaguars act like their offensive line is so good that they don't have to give guys like that a shot. And that is absolutely what bothers me about looking to them moving forward and thinking that they're going to do things differently. Now, it's just one guy, but there are a lot of examples just like that. Why you keep throwing so much money at the defensive line and so little at the offensive line when the offensive line is what protects Trevor Lawrence? I just don't understand, and I never will. And hopefully whoever they hire as a coach will understand that and come in here and demand that they do more and go overkill on the offensive line. If there's one area where I think you go overkill, there's more than one. I think you go overkill at defensive line, but I think offensive line, in my opinion, comes first. That's just me. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. We'll talk more about the coaching search. If there's anything that comes up, I will definitely have it for you here on Locked On Jaguars. Check me out too in the barbershop on Locked On NFL. It's the second edition of Locked On NFL that is daily. Tyler Rowland hits you upside your head early in the morning with like a double shot of espresso, and I slide through with the barbershop feels and give you all the knowledge from around the National Football League. Take care. We'll see you next time. Take care of each other. Happy MLK Day. Enjoy it. I will. And you do the same.